Hi, and welcome to Baachu Rain Market Development Webinar. Today we will be covering the education market, the schools, the colleges, and universities. So if you haven't attended any of our previous webinar, please do go in and to baachurain.com/events. You could listen into all our webinars on demand for free. Plan your market strategy around this COVID crisis and position yourself for growth. So this is webinar number 9. And we are in here, and we will be moving to the residential housing, retail, and property management tomorrow. But today, the topic is schools, colleges, and universities. As I mentioned, all our webinars are available at baachurain.com/events. Please do visit baachurain.com/events. We also have a COVID-specific FM market insights as well. So come in, browse through where possible, plan your market strategy, as I mentioned. So who we are. Many of you have been attending our webinars for some time, so without not much introduction there for us. We are a global small business specializing on facilities management, market research, insights, intelligence, grown over the past 5 years to support many of the leading FM companies. So that's who we are, progress to support investors and buyers. End of the day, we come out as this independent voice of the market, unlike many of the market research companies who just research with not much application towards the market. So we closely work with our buyers and our suppliers and the investors to have that independent view of the market and providing sustainable value back to the industry. That's who we are. So 3 key stakeholders. If you're a service provider, you might have heard it time and time again. As I mentioned, CEOs, MDs, we work with them one-to-one to give them an independent view of the market so that they could make some data-driven insights, use it to make some solid decisions to maneuver their company in these testing times and also previously towards their growth journey. Then we have strategy and market directors who predominantly work with us to build that market awareness and position their company towards their new prospects and also make more out of their existing prospects. Then we work with the sales directors to build their strengthen and build their pipeline, build some bid specific intelligence, help them to win and grow. Investors and buyers, predominantly the same. So education and COVID-19, many of the content that we talked in the past are pretty much applicable to this sector because education as its own is a buyer in addition to being a service provider in itself. So what that meant is they also furloughed off a lot more employees. They do have cash flow crisis because, especially in the private sector, because not many students are coming, and also the funding from the government has slowed down to a certain extent. So if it's a school, the school is being progressing with vulnerable children with critical workers. They are attending the school for the past 6 weeks, whereas every other kid who doesn't fit into this key worker element, they are being working from home pretty much for the very first time, going through virtual classes. And even schools, not many schools had that build up to provide virtual classes, but they somehow managed to crack it, and 6 to 8 weeks now they're moving on. But it's not going to be long. As you know, 1st of June, the expectation is for schools to reopen, and government is working with Department of Education to come up with some guidance saying how does the class needs to be structured, and what are the infection procedures, disinfection procedures that they need to have in place, etc. So the guidance are coming as we speak. But the biggest question is, yes, the schools are open. Will the parents and the teachers turn up to work considering COVID hasn't been fully eradicated in wave 1? So we already seen in Change.org, thousands of parents signing up that they do need to have a right to not to send the kid to school this year. And also you will also see teachers not really comfortable turning up to school because they are not 100% sure whether the environment that they're going to work with will be COVID-19 free. So it will be interesting dynamics, but that is the situation as we speak. Then we continue in our education, as you can clearly see, some of the emotional and mental aspects, kids wearing face coverings, teachers wearing face coverings, trying to work together. For the very first time, this is going to happen in the living memory. How that whole thing is going to pan out emotionally, mentally for the kids is something that we need to look upon. And again, like any other office and commercial buildings that we touched, the workplace, school workplace needs to be set up towards this new COVID secure guidelines. many of the FM providers have already come out with their way of how they are going to help their own clients in doing that. And many of the buyers, including both private and public sectors, have already structured their own way of how they're going to come out of this, encouraging their staff, encouraging whoever they belong to come back to work uh, in their own time. So what that meant is, there is a 2 meter distance. And also, if you look specifically for schools, imagine the cleaning of communal areas and also the communal surfaces like bathrooms, kitchen, tea points, and the kids especially, thousands of kids or hundreds of kids running around with whatever they touched, whatever they are playing with, keeping them sanitized all the time. It's going to be a challenge. And most importantly, when half of the workforce or majority of the workforce is working from home, opening the school, or if the parents are going back, there's not much childcare guidance. When will the childcare kick in? These are all some of the dynamics that's happening with the educational sector. These are dynamics that you as a service provider needs to have in mind what's happening inside the mind of your buyer. So that's what I thought I'll share that insights. And again, if you look in schools specifically, the catering school meals were opened, even in certain cases, even if you don't go to schools, many schools were still feeding the children on specific times so that you can go in, get the food as a takeaway. But if you're a key worker children, they were still catering it. But either way, there was a massive drop down in the amount of catering facilities, building facilities, cleaning facilities that has happened in this past 6 weeks in the schools. What that meant is the education sector, especially the service staff, needs to revamp their supply chain, bring back their staff from furlough, train the staff around this new COVID regime of social distancing, check again the allergies of children, re-establish meal ordering for parents, you name it. All these things needs to happen if you're a catering provider for education, for education sector. Same sort of stuff is applicable to cleaning, building maintenance, and other elements as well. So what that meant is, how much do we know about school before COVID versus how much do we need to know about school after COVID is a massive learning curve there. Very quickly, staff needs to be ramped up, both the educational staff, the admin staff, and the support staff like our FM providers, to come along with this whole regime and just to manage the facilities in a way that COVID doesn't happen. Or if it happened, how can they disinfect in the quickest possible time, bring back the kids, what sort of safety mechanism they can go for. It's going to be a challenging task, but these are some of the challenges that they're already planning through. Then if you move around from schools and if you look at colleges, for example, that's a different beast altogether, where here you have again thousands of students. They could be international students or local students, but they are there, some still staying in student accommodation because they can't leave the country, and they have traveled all the way. Postgraduate students, research students in particular, already facilities management providers are already taking a lot of effort in ensuring that those children are safe, those teenagers are safe in their own environment. Then many of the students have moved back. Unlike the schools, many of the colleges and universities had virtual environments, so they were able to very quickly move on. But international students are planning to come to this country during the Easter break and on the other break. Some colleges had new starters just around Easter. After Easter, those colleges have been massively hit, and you can clearly see there are close to 2.5 million students studying in UK higher education sector. When the colleges do open, which they're planning to in staggered way, maybe some are pushed to September. Some higher education colleges might open early, depending on where they are. But that again comes with its own risk of how FM providers and universities and colleges can work together to prevent, or at least to a certain extent mitigate, the risk of COVID in their big environment. So some like the like the critical workers, some of the researchers were still happening in the colleges and institutions. That's still happening. And like any other business or any other company or any other social enterprise, the colleges and universities also furloughed off, and many of the staffs were working virtually. Moving into this domain of teaching children is differently, but running the whole operations virtually comes with its own barrier. Again, many FM providers already providing this sort of 24/7 virtual support to manage the buildings, and also on ready to provide a cleaning for their own buildings as well. So what that meant is The dynamics here are very different compared to what offices and buildings are because of the age groups of the end user, which is the kids all the way from, nursery to junior school, senior school, primary school, you name it, secondary school, and you have colleges and universities. How much educational, cultural, discipline that we can teach them in actually sanitizing themselves, keeping them safe, hygienic, is going to be falling under the lap of the FM providers, but we all need to be geared up in servicing that. In addition to that, if we look, many of the higher education institutions were getting funding because they were one of the biggest apprenticeship service provider, but that severely disrupted due to lack of COVID-19, and there was not much support that was given by the government to a certain extent to the independent training providers, and now they are going through with lack of funding. Still need to ensure that whoever is going through apprenticeships in this country still get the maximum out of them. So they are facing the challenge. And as you can clearly see, these universities, these colleges, these schools are the place where the future of this country is going to come out with. The more they are impacted, the more the country is losing this new workforce, or the potential workforce. And that's going to be a massive challenge. Today, we talk about employees who are already in the workforce. What options do we have for these teenagers, these university students, these people who are coming for work experience post schools? What choices do they have in this recession-driven environment is a question mark. But these are the things that the universities, the colleges, and also the schools are having in their mind. How can we ensure that our users, our children are safe and secure? And what can FM providers do to do that? So that's the mindset of your buyer, what's happening in their mind. So you as an FM service provider, if you want to look at the addressable spend or the addressable market, we are looking at, at the moment, there are close to 150 local education authorities, which has close to 1,000 plus schools in England alone. Every single education authority, as you can clearly have at least 10 to 20 schools, and you can clearly see the numbers going up. So what that meant is, if you are working on education, not always the budget comes directly from Department of Education, that passed on to the colleges or the schools. The funding most of the time is also managed or controlled or approved to a certain extent by a local authority as well. So that dynamics is something you might need to understand if you are new to this market. The second one is, in addition to that, as I mentioned, there are a lot more further education apprenticeships, sixth form, tertiary, specialist colleges. To a certain extent, they have the funding. Again, most of the funding comes from Department of Education, either through apprenticeships or through various other means that they do it by working through the local economy themselves. Then you have the big private and public universities and colleges. Again, not all colleges are public colleges. Many of the institutions are private, and the only way they get the money is through their own funding mechanisms. Many of the funding come through international students or from the tuition fees of the students. As you can imagine, the tuition fees for the next year is pretty much hampered massively. And to a certain extent, UCAS and others are, which is the body that allocates students to the universities, have even been notified by Department of Education that don't give any full-time offers yet. Clearly see the dynamics that's coming and hitting the private institutions, and public institutions funding has been pretty much come down. So they are in a self-help environment themselves, but as a number, it's pretty big. The volume of the contracts is very, very high, but the value of the contracts normally is between £1 to £3 million. So that's the dynamics that you need to understand if you're operating in this sector. The volume of the project is pretty high. It could go all the way from a school, which is 100K, 150K, to £1 million, whereas in a university, it could go from $500,000 all the way to 3 million, depending on what type of service that they're procuring. But as a FM industry, there are a lot more volume of opportunities there in this sector, especially if you have a local presence. So we already touched a million times on this, but if you're listening to this for the very first time, here is a quick 5-minute market snapshot. As I mentioned, if you go to www.baachurain.com, you could get 20 slides, 2022 slides of the market snapshot, much more wider than what I'm going to present now. So please do log into baachurain.com, and in the pop-up, register your details and download the overall market outlook. So because this, regardless of whether COVID or non-COVID, Brexit or non-Brexit, these are the projects that's already been outsourced in this country. Whether it's been insourced, whether somebody else is going to run this, not you, whether you'll be lucky enough to renew a contract, these projects are already outsourced, which meant some form of the other, there is some clarity, some form of the other, there is some structure here. And that's the one thing that I want you to consider here looking into this. So if you're new, it's 85 billion pounds. We crunched 85% of the private sector and 95% of the public sector. And this is what the market is. So if you add the data gaps, you are looking at roughly 100 billion pounds is going to be the UK market. And out of which, as you know, many of the projects are in third or fourth generation outsourcing, much more matured market. And as always, many of the top deals are managed by the top companies. The top 80 predominantly cover 95% of the market, and the top 5 between themselves cover 33% of the market. So these are infrastructure-based. The FM projects tend to go to them, and any other national projects goes to these guys, and any only smaller projects normally being scattered between the local trusts, local suppliers. So the provider landscape, as I mentioned, it's pretty large. To assert, there are at least 5,000 small and big FM companies who have won at least 1 or 2 tenders in public or private sector. So, and there are many more smaller projects under 50,000 pounds, which we don't even hear about in the project. So you can imagine there should be thousands of FM players. But if a quick snapshot of the FM provider landscape between these guys, they control a lot more of the FM market spend. So the another key point that we touched, that always at the moment, because of the workplace optimization, workplace planning, how we are going to structure everything for COVID, there are some companies moving towards workplace, some companies are staying with FM, but adding multiple services on preventing COVID. So you will clearly see a beautiful merge or a nice separation between the companies, or the direction of companies. Both services cannot be done by the same provider, or if they do, they need to have partnerships, so they need to have subcontractors in place to deliver both. But FM, the standard FM, cleaning, security, catering, building maintenance, and the FM optimization, FM software and all the things also will be coming on place. That's surveying, designing, you name it. All these things to a certain extent needs to work hand-on, and these two needs to work together with the buyer to deliver the post-COVID new normal environment. So some are partnering already, some are building this capability themselves, some are doing on their own, trying to do differently. So again, these dynamics are pretty interesting. But how it's going to apply with their own buyer, it's important. If you already have a contract, work with your current buyer and try to understand how you can help them in planning this whole scenario. So very quickly, if you look, yes, it's an 85 billion pound market split between public and private. 55% is private and 45% is public. As I mentioned, the value of the opportunity in private is high, but the volume of the opportunity in public is high. That's the biggest differentiation that you might need to consider. So the type of services, again, we touched it. It's a beautiful blend. So again, integrated FM is still the highest because private sector prefers, and then private sector office and commercial buildings prefers that, which is the largest. So what that meant is, obviously, if you use the statistical analysis, the largest market prefers a certain type of service, and that drips feed inside. Whereas if you look at the other sectors, you will clearly see that there is still a nice balance between IFM, hard FM, and soft services. So which means you, regardless of who you are, the market still is available to you in multiple formats, but whether you can package it in a different way, shape it in a different way, again, it depends on your own buyer, how you can shape that for yourself. Other support services are related FM type services, document management and other things in certain extents. As you always say, even the likes of parking management and other elements does come here. So you might need to think whether that's part of your portfolio. So what are the key sectors in FM? The key sectors in FM, you have office and commercial buildings, central government, local government, manufacturing, industrial. We touched all 4 part of the market development. Between them, they already cover 70% of the market. Then we have education there at close to 3 to 4% of the market. It's a small market, but the value of the opportunities are pretty, or the volume of the opportunities are pretty high. That's where we are. Let's move into public sector. Central government, local government, biggest sectors, followed by NHS, which we touched. Then you have defense, which is also part of the central government, but specifically I left it outside, which is also coming part of central government. And it's procured through CCS framework. And if you are looking for local government, central government type of opportunities, please do bid for the new Crown Commercial Services cleaning market framework, because you never know in the coming future, in the next year or two, local authorities and education institutions might use it to procure services. So that's something you might need to consider. More details available in the central government webinar for about the tender. So we'll touch residential and housing tomorrow. But for now, this is the market, as we say, public sector. If you're a pure play public sector provider, this is the data points that you might need to consider. Now, we touched that already about the different services, the different markets pursue. And if you look at, okay, immediately, you know, I play in FM, but I am pure play in certain markets, or I'm a pure play in certain service. You know, where do I place my eggs? If I am an FM provider, and if I want to know where the number of opportunities are going to come, these are some of the high number of opportunities. And clearly see local government, the volume of opportunities are high. Office and commercial buildings, the volume of opportunities are high, and education, volume of opportunities are high. So in this sector, as you can clearly see, education, schools, predominantly catering is a big deal there. Then if you can look into the hard FM and integrated FM still plays a role there. Leisure, central government again is a biggie. We'll cover leisure early next week, but education as a market, please do think what touch points you have in this sector. And if you don't have it, find a way to enter. Either it's schools, colleges, or universities, public or private. They all have the different characteristics. See what touch points you have and see whether you have scope to go for. That would be my choice. But again, if you already have an existing client who are in this sector, that's great. Try to go deep on this sector. So let's go and look at some numbers. The first thing is we touched what's happening with COVID to these institutions as we speak. They all have their own challenges, how they are going to build up this environment for the end users, which is students. In addition to that, their funding is being curtailed, their dynamics are changing, the staff won't be willing to turn to serve their own end user. They might need to give more to their staff, you know, give them much more safer environment, not only to the students, but also to their end staff and the researchers and anybody associated to that. So the dynamics with schools have always followed the dynamics of their local councils. And local councils, depending on who they are, what they do, tend to insource some of the FM services because they want to give the deals to the local providers. If they can't give the deals to local providers, then they prefer to insource and deliver themselves. But the success, how good are they in delivering the services themselves, is something nobody has done it. But the principles of social value tend to be applied to the outsourced contracts. So if you do operate in this sector, you might need to be thinking carefully about social value and what contributions you are doing, not just to your contract, but around your local community. For a smaller value contract, as you can clearly see, between £1 to £2 million, that's a lot of burden. But as you can clearly mention, the volume of opportunities is pretty high. And if you are in this, it's the same lift and drop of model, provided you have the local presence. It's something you might need to consider. But always keep in mind the sector here is pro insource, which means the percentage of this market will be insourced. But again, if it's insourced, do they have the capability to have this new COVID-19 disinfected environment? I am not sure. So that's sort of the tendency of insourcing, or the proposition of insourcing, the rate at which insourcing might slow down. But that's something you might need to be wary of. But here it is, public sector, education, especially in the schools. If you are a catering provider, yes, you might have an issue with Brexit, with the way how the food is going to turn out. And most people were well prepared on the challenges, and most people are already serving. We already touched, again, some of the issues that they need to build up the supply chain, they need to build up the menu, they need to also build up how they're going to serve. If they need to have a drop-off points, need to collect some takeaways, have some food to deliver to their own kids who are coming back. Those dynamics weren't happening before, but now as a soft FM provider, you will need to have that sort of process or procedures in place to serve multivariant type of delivery. So that's yet 94 to 100 contracts versus 1.6 million. And then average value, then you also have a good average 5 to 6 years. That's a good thing about this sector. We touched manufacturing, it's 3 years or 2 years, 3+2, something like that. But here you do have slightly longer contracts. Then if you look at the integrated FM, again, the number of contracts here, I just took a snapshot just in the local London. So if you look here, it's 26 contracts and predominantly around 600 million is there. And the average value is slightly higher. As you can imagine, it covers both cleaning, security, building maintenance, inclusive. So the average value is also high. So some providers, pure play catering only, some kind of bucket together. Then you have, again, pure play just in London alone. If you look, you have hard FM, pure play hard FM, again, 2.4 million, 34 contracts, 6 years average. So the average duration is 6. Some of the FM contracts, especially hard FM, go slightly higher. So you can clearly see if you're a hard FM player, there is much more solid revenue that you can go for. It's not 500,000 or 1 million or 2 million. Some of the contracts are even higher, and that could go all the way up to 2.5 to 3 million pounds. And if you're a hard FM player, that's on the top end of the mid-tier FM contract, which is great. So moving on. If you look at private institutions, again, there is a difference between universities in general, public and private. Colleges follow schools' methodology to a certain extent, and then you have what we call the trusts, which are not necessarily private, not necessarily public, and there are some schools, academies, who also procure in their own way. So academies are slightly simple because you have one college, one academy runs 30 schools or something, or you can say some group of colleges running 7 or 8 colleges, and they are part of an association. So there is much more scientific way you can approach the whole market rather than to go with one-to-one as well. So look for some of the associations where the colleges belong to, look for their commercial team, look and approach it slightly differently so that you have much more different way of approaching the market there. So if you are just a private universities, even universities like Oxford are delivering their services themselves. So again, it's because of the young population, teenagers, millionaires, they have their view of the environment, how they could self-help, and how they could serve their own country, serve their own planet. So what that meant is, universities, there were a lot more in sourcing project that happens there recently. Whether the trend continues now with COVID, again, is a question mark, but in the past this has happened, and you might need to be prepared for doing it in your own local arena. Having said that, this assumes that universities are not building anything new. But if the universities just build, say, student accommodation, or they're building a different food hall or a different stadiums, or you name it, anything inside, then you also have a choice. If you're a construction plus FM company, it's good to be part of this sector because you can build and manage in like a PFI type contract, not PFI directly, but you could build and manage up to 25 years solid. So that kind of makes many construction stroke FM providers making universities as one of their core market. But if you're not, if you're just providing FM services for the facilities that's already been available, then you might need to be wary of, yes, at the back of their mind, they might insource the service because 1 or 2 providers have already done it, and 1 or 2 providers are successfully doing it, even getting ISO related ratings, cleaning operatives, they have structured programs and they have done it. So unless you deliver bigger, better quality service, keep in mind you might be benchmarked against those people. So let's look at hard FM. If you look hard FM, clearly universities are not, it's not 6 years as you can see there, it's actually 3 years. And then it's common with private sector. Public sector tend to be slightly longer, and private sector tend to be between 3 to 5 years. And the value of opportunities in colleges is also between 1 to 1.5 million. Again, this is a snapshot from few universities. If you look, the number of contracts is still there and the values are also there. So if you look at the next one, soft FM again, if you look, the benchmarking here is again between 1 to 1.5 million. Duration of the contracts is still 4 years, and then number of contracts are soft, especially colleges and private institutions by different providers. But private schools is a tricky market. Private schools, not necessarily they publish information. It's normally done locally. But again, as I mentioned, there are associations that you could be part of that might give you an insight about how the whole market is structured. So here we go. Again, the duration of the contract is again 3 to 4 years, and the number of opportunities in the market and in the value of the opportunity swings between 1 to 1.5 million if you are looking at private education. Same thing with integrated. Funnily enough, I was expecting this to be slightly high, but maybe it is what it is. So if you look at the universities or the schools, we saw these spend around £3 million, but universities, I was hoping it to be slightly higher, but maybe I might need to revisit my data point. But as it stands is the number of opportunities are still there, which means you have split between soft FM, hard FM, and IFM. There is a market regardless of who you are. If you want to go IFM, yes, it's there. Hard FM plus IFM, bundle it, you can go with that. Or if you're pure play, still the market is available for you. So the key points. Before you enter this sector, look for touch points in your service and adjacent sectors, because if it's new for you, look, there might be some building maintenance, there might be some lift maintenance, there might be some sort of security services, there might be something that you might have done in the region or do something there. So use that. Look into your own client base and look for your touch points, because you might know this market. Unlike any market, you might know this market, you might already have a touch point to this market and find it. Again, having a presence in local government or NHS might have a dot to this sector, because similarity wise they both prefer local. So if you're already in there, there might be some place there, considering the joint working between local government on NHS and the social care, and local government on education, on providing the economy and providing the local touch points in the local area. So that always think, if you're not always presenting in this sector, think about what touch points you already have, either with your service or with the sectors that you operate. So next one is local presence. If you're operating in this sector, you do need to have local presence, or at least a different branding, unlike you're a national provider. Yes, for certain type of projects, you can be who you are, but if there is a luxury, if there is an opportunity for you, please do retweak your branding to make it useful and make it as local presence, because it goes all the way. Next, we have to see whether the universities will continue to invest on buildings and other things in their own estates, because their outflow of the new students have massively gone down. But assuming you are a provider who can get funding from your equity market or debt market, and you are in a position to strongly deliver, say, student accommodation and also university like estates management, then this is a sector for you. If you have not done it, enter this if you have the capability. But if you're already in this sector, please do continue to go more, because it's not an easy sector. But once you are in, to a certain extent, margins are slightly better compared to other sectors, because of the student accommodation element that comes with it and the wider element that comes with it as well. So your ability to build that student experience is a soft thing, and by building that student experience meant you are not a pure play FM provider, you're an experience provider. So that comes with its own thing. So finally, this is where what I thought I will touch. Regardless of what you know about the market, now is the time to position what you know about the market, build some data points around what you know. You don't need to know the market. Build insights about what you know, who you know, what does your customer say, and then build it from there. You build your position, you build your potential, and build the competition element around it. Whole purpose of this market development webinar is just to tell you, regardless of what people say, regardless of what happens, there are at least 11,000 outsource opportunities in the market. Some form of the other, they will come. And we believe, at least in the next 12 to 18 months, there are 1,250 opportunities that are expiring. We already touched in the very early, in 1 month into COVID, FM. Some of the projects are terminated, some of the projects are renewed, and some of the projects are, let's wait and see, short-term renewal. So you might need to be prepared for flurry of projects hitting late November, October, even January 2021. But for now, the opportunities in the market are still there, and most of the opportunities will be volume based around 500K to 5 million. Already, most of you have plans to make the workplace secure. Move into those things. We don't know whether it's going to be a W curve, V curve, or any curve in recession. When the COVID crisis is going to come, already talks are about that we need to start to live with it. So that's the talk. Economy cannot be waiting. You have seen people talking different ways, but offices will be opened from Wednesday, and schools will be open from June the 1st. Colleges will be open, some colleges around that time, some in September. Either way, workplace planning, virtual teams will continue to exist. Disinfection, security of the buildings will continue to exist. And how you're going to manage the users and with the flow marking, with the restrictions around what they can touch, what they can't touch, how quickly can you clean, the breaks, open and close times, you are expected to deliver, go beyond what you can do as an FM provider. Go through that, because most important thing is there is a huge opportunity between how people react with property and then property reacts with the wider market. And that's what you're going to see. Different types of projects that was never outsourced in the past will come and hit the market again in a very different form. And again, direct awards. Don't underestimate the power of direct awards, because many providers now are not, even the public sector, are not even considering going for full-fledged procurement. They have now got some level of assurance, some level of legislation that helps them to go for direct awards. If your services are good, if you're happy to deliver what you're supposed to deliver, aim for direct awards and get things moving. There are 400 plus FM contracts available in education. As long as you're resilient, as long as you build a relationship, like every other market, this market is there waiting for you. But this market historically have always enabled local providers. You have local education providers who have always done building maintenance up to £50,000. They manage local authorities close to 10, 12 schools locally, easy £5 million, £500,000 type of projects on an annual basis. And that's keep them going. So you might need to be wary of competing against those people if you are a big provider. But if you're a smaller provider, this is the best sector for you. We already touched this. There will be some level of market erosion from the main players. Will they be doing what they're doing? Will they be operating in the core market, or will they be still continuing to operate in a much wider market? It's something that we need to wait and see. But some level of reactions are going to come and hit. So these are my final points for you. Expect disruption in current and future bids. Look out for extension if you haven't for your current contracts. Use this time to strategically plan. You don't need, yes, the market is moving, but you know you are not starting from scratch. You already have a portfolio of contracts. This is the right time to use a portfolio of contracts to understand more about what your own buyers are doing. If you understand what your own buyers are doing, through that, you will understand what the market is going to do. And when you understand what the market is going to do, you'll be well positioned to do that. Again, direct awards, more likely plan for direct awards. So it's ideal time for you to stress test your growth plans. Yes, it's easy to slash, we are not going to grow by 20%, we are not grow by 5%. But as I mentioned, define the business you are in. Decide who will be your customers. Look at your brand, look at your pipeline, look at your account development in your chosen sectors or in the sectors you're operating projects. See what you can do with that in this next 3 to 4 months. By the time the market will to a certain extent stabilize, or you at least know we all will be going through new normal, but you at least know much more about your positioning. And unfortunately, if I need to restructure your team and build some capabilities or give up some capabilities, it is what it is. But this is an ideal time for you to review and stress test. Tomorrow, as you know, is FM Day, World FM Day. And yes, we need to celebrate more and more about who we are, what we do, and the contribution that we are giving, especially all the services that our team is giving. But in between, we also lost few souls. If you can, please tomorrow, 12 o'clock, raise a candle and for like 30 seconds or so, and then give your respect, honoring our own FM heroes. So that's it from me. And there is lots more insight on COVID-19 as we published. We published a huge article day before yesterday on preparation towards exit planning from government. And then, we are doing more and more of this with the people who just, okay, we know this is what we need to do. Can you facilitate it? Can you come and give the market insights and also work with us to do the strategic planning for us? Define what business we are in, decide who will be our customers, and help us to have a quick view on what the brand pipeline and account management with us. We can do the 2.5 hours. Sometimes we do 2.5 hours virtually. If the market opens, we can do it one day. But for now, we already done 4 or 5 sessions around it. If you do need any help, let us know. Or this is the pipeline. Let's review and let's boost the pipeline. We can do that very quickly as well. The point here is market is still there available to you. How can you spot the opportunities in the market is now very, very different. And you need to be in a position to fill those gaps and try to consolidate your offerings. Before, if you are a reactive tender provider who wait for tenders to fall on your lap, now you will be in a very sticky position. Because as you know, everybody is trying to decide how they are going to decide. We already saw a few buyers terminating the contracts, few buyers extending the contracts, few providers following the staff, not following the staff. There's so many dynamics. You should be in a position to spot opportunities in the quickest possible time and act on it pretty quickly. So I'm not going to dwell deeper on that. Try to react quickly as much as you can, identify trends. Yes, it is sensitive. Yes, we are in COVID testing time, but this is the time between winners and losers. Some won't be there because some are strongly resilient. You are resilient, unlike most other FM providers who are not resilient, but they're still pressing the button and moving on. We just need to wait and see. So if you're not, then continuing what you're doing, and these are some of the timetables that we are working through. The webinars will be available for you whenever you want in our website on demand. Always come in, refresh it, reach out to us, and also keep an eye on our COVID-specific articles every now and then. That's it from us. Look after yourself, stay safe, stay healthy, and I will